Hey guys, it's Anthony. In this video, watch Jeffrey Sachs explain amazingly and clearly how the United States is pushing us closer to World War III, why the US government hates China, Russia, Iran, the real reason why we hate them and why we can't get along with them, and why it's mainly our actions that are pushing us closer and closer to World War III. I think this is the most important issue in this year, and it should scare anyone that we're so close to World War III. We should try to avoid starting a nuclear war as much as we can, because that would be devastating to us, to our children, to our grandchildren, and so we should try to solve our issues, but he explains why we can't. Check it out.
So in the end, there was no path to success of a venture that started back in the Clinton administration, continued with Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden, which was to push NATO to Ukraine despite the clearest possible, brightest, biggest red line that Russia could convey in peacetime, which is don't do that. And Russia's attitude towards NATO and Ukraine was exactly analogous to what our attitude would be to a Russian military base on the Rio Grande in Mexico. It would be, don't try that.
Yes.
And this is obvious. It's not subtle. It has been expressed for more than 30 years. But now we know, and more comes out and will come out. But Clinton approved this plan in 1994 that NATO would go east, including to Ukraine. Zbig Brzezinski laid it out in 1997 in an article which I always asserted was not Brzezinski's idea, but his way of telling his colleagues in the civilian sector, let's say, what was already decided. And that is that, yes, of course, we will go all the way to Ukraine.
The reality, guys, is that the conflict in Ukraine is largely the result of reckless actions by American and Western leaders who have consistently pushed NATO closer to Russia's border. This expansionist policy has ignored Russia's legitimate security concerns and only serves to increase tension in the region. Now, take the case of President Yanukovych, a democratically elected leader who sought a balanced approach in Ukraine. He aimed to maintain good relations with both the European Union and Russia. However, this neutral stance made him an obstacle to American interests, and so the United States government, with its ambition to pull Ukraine into NATO, saw Yanukovych as a roadblock, as an obstacle, and they had to remove him. So in 2014, the CIA played a key role in instigating a coup to oust him from power, and despite the fact that Russia made it clear that such interference was unacceptable, we still did it. And imagine if the roles were reversed. What if Russia started forming an anti-American alliance with Mexico and began building military bases right on the US border? The United States would never tolerate that kind of threat so close to our home, right? Yet this is exactly what we've been doing. This is exactly what the West has been doing by encroaching on Russia's borders and disregarding its security interests. The West has provoked this crisis. It could have been avoided, but we've just been poking and poking. And so look where we are now.
And everyone in punditry that says, oh, don't worry about that, that's a bluff. I profoundly resent the ignorance of those people. Generally, when people are ignorant, I don't resent it.
Right.
I try to help, but I
correct it. Yeah.
I resent the ignorance when it endangers my grandchildren.
Yeah.
That's it. And they endanger my grandchildren by saying, don't worry about nuclear war.
Yes.
That's a bluff. And that I don't want to hear from anybody, because anyone that says that understands nothing about the reality of our world.
The people
today.
who say that, I feel exactly the same way, and I'm outraged by it, but also distressed by it because of what it says about our leadership class. But I notice that a lot of people who say that are former U.S. military officers working in some think tank.
So the war in Ukraine is not just a local conflict now. It's a big, broader geopolitical struggle. And it's fueled by Western ambitions to weaken Russia and expand their influence. So this reckless pursuit by the U.S. and its allies only brought the devastation of Ukraine, and it's going to continue to destroy the country. And unfortunately, the people in Ukraine foolishly believe that the U.S. is here to help them. But the fact is, the United States is interested in Ukraine's natural resources, its fertile land. And that's why we're helping them. Even Senator Lindsey Graham admitted this. I made a video about this. Senator Lindsey Graham admitted the real reason why we're there. He accidentally admitted it, but he admitted it. So in my opinion, this is extremely risky. We're getting closer and closer to World War III by doing this. Our leaders they don't care at all. They just keep pushing and pushing us closer to World War III when it comes to Russia. So this is absolutely true.
We've known throughout the nuclear era, there have been hotheads, irrational people, vulgar people who have called for nuclear war. We have come extraordinarily close to nuclear war, and we've had people in the U.S. military all along who called for first strikes on various occasions against the Soviet Union, which in any plausible scenario could well have ended the world. And those people were in positions of authority. The case that I've studied most closely in my life is the Cuban Missile Crisis. I wrote a book about the aftermath of the Cuban Missile Crisis and Kennedy's diplomacy in 1963 to pull back from the brink. But in the Cuban Missile Crisis, almost every one of President Kennedy's advisors said strike. And there's very good reason to believe that that would have led to a full-scale nuclear war that would have ended civilization.
People need to understand that the president, although he seems like he has a lot of power and he can be very influential, it's true that the president has a lot of power, is very influential, but he doesn't call the shots in Washington. He doesn't really control the country. It's men in suits. It's three-letter agencies that control our country. There's a reason why we're always at war. Ever since the military-industrial complex was created, we've been at wars. We've been at war with Korea. We've been at war with Vietnam, the Gulf War, the Iraq War, Syria, Afghanistan. We've constantly been at war because that's what the three-letter agencies want. That's what the people in power want. They want to push us closer to wars because wars are very profitable for the people who run our country. And not for Americans, not for American citizens, not for ordinary people. We suffer from these constant wars. It doesn't benefit us at all that we spent trillions of dollars in Afghanistan, that we were there for 20 years. How does that benefit the average American? In fact, it's quite the opposite. When average Americans are so upset right now, are struggling economically, cannot afford anything, and our leaders are so focused right now on passing bills to send money to Israel, to Ukraine, to fund wars. Why? For decades, we've been spending more than we've been generating in income taxes or any taxes, but we still always find money to send to other countries and always have enough money to invade countries and start wars.
And there's no reason for them to be an enemy. And so it's exactly the same logic.
Except on the question of Taiwan, I think there are a lot of people who maybe haven't thought it through who feel like preserving Taiwan's sovereignty, to the extent it has sovereignty, I guess, is a core American interest. What's your view?
The issue with Taiwan is that the United States policy, absolutely clear, it's the basis of our diplomatic relations with China, is what's called the One China policy,
right,
which is that Taiwan is part of China. Now, what's interesting is that the Republic of China, that is the Taiwan installed government on the losing side of the Civil War, said there's one China, but it's us. And on the other side in Beijing, they also said, yes, we agree, there's one China, but it's us. And so there wasn't a disagreement of whether there's one China or two Chinas. There's one China according to the Republic of China and according to the People's Republic of China being the mainland, the place with the 1.4 billion people. When the U.S. normalized relations with the People's Republic of China, it said we do so on the basis of a one China policy. Now, in 1982, the U.S. and China signed a communique. It's very important. People can go online and look it up. And it was a statement by the United States that said, we have no intention to arm Taiwan for the long term. We are providing arms for Taiwan now because historically we backed Taiwan, but now we have established diplomatic relations with PRC, but we have no intention of doing this for the long term. In fact, we will taper off our arms support for Taiwan and it will come to an end. That was 1982. That's like so many things the United States promises and then reneges on. It's essentially the same as the promise that was made to Gorbachev and to Yeltsin in 1990, 91, 92 that NATO would never enlarge.
So what he's saying is absolutely true, because in the 1970s, the United States, led by President Nixon, started building ties with the People's Republic of China. So this was a big deal because it helped the U.S. counter Soviet influence in the Soviet Union during the Cold War. In the 1970s, it was right in the middle of the Cold War, and we wanted to spread our influence around the world and counter Soviet influence. Although China was already a communist country, we still wanted to formally build diplomatic ties with that country because it was a really big country with 1 billion people, basically. So by recognizing the PRC as the legitimate government of China and accepting that Taiwan was part of China, the U.S. led the foundation for better relations with China, and which helped keep things relatively peaceful with China. We never imagined going to war with China because we understood, look, Taiwan is China. That's just a fact. But now the U.S. is taking a risky turn by showing more and more support for Taiwan. And this isn't really about protecting democracy, as American leaders often claim. It's more about gaining a strategic advantage, keeping China in check, because Taiwan is in a crucial spot that the U.S. sees as the key to controlling the Asia-Pacific region and limiting China's power. So this isn't about freedom, about democracy for the Taiwanese people, just like we're not protecting Ukraine for its democracy and freedom. It's all about holding on to American dominance, the whole machine that is the foreign policy of the U.S. of going around the world, being the police state that it is, going around the world, trying to go topple governments and trying to control the world, basically. The problem is that this approach pokes at one of basically the most insensitive issue in China. And so for China, Taiwan is part of its territory. And any attempt to separate it from the mainland is a serious threat. China has made it clear that it would use force to defend Taiwan if it needed to. This isn't a small skirmish that we're used to. For the past 60, 70 years, we've been fighting with Korea, Vietnam, with the Taliban, with Afghanistan, and Iraq, Syria. China is not a small little country that we can push around. This is a superpower with a nuclear weapon, just like Russia. So our leaders are really risking it right there. This can lead to a global war involving nuclear powers like China, Russia, even Iran. And so the impact of such a war would be devastating. It would be devastating for me, for you, for our children, our grandchildren. So in my opinion, in order for us to stray away from World War III, the U.S. just go back to respecting the one China policy and work out its differences with China through peaceful diplomacy and not these aggressive actions that we're doing. Getting into a conflict with China over Taiwan is the last thing America needs right now. Our military is not what it used to be. We've got leadership more focused on woke issues than on preparing for real combat. Meanwhile, many of our young people are so unhealthy and unfit to fight in a serious war. And let's be honest, our country is dealing with enormous problems here at home. We're facing economic struggles, political division, social unrest, and we can't afford to be dragged into a war that isn't even a direct threat to our survival. For China, Taiwan is an existential issue. They see it as part of their country, and they will do whatever it takes to bring it back under their control. In the end, Taiwan could end up being the biggest loser, just like Ukraine, unfortunately. We lied to Ukraine that everything would be okay, that they would win, but look what's happening. And so Taiwan is in a risky situation. The same thing could repeat in Taiwan. Does this mean that Russian and Chinese leaders are good? Absolutely not. I'm not here to defend them. They are not good or bad. They just want to be treated and respected as the superpower nations that they are. They are superpower nations. These are great countries, great civilizations with a rich and amazing history. And we need to try to get along with them and not be so arrogant and assume that there are no consequences for meddling in foreign affairs, like starting coups and provoking our counterparts. So this is what I think. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you disagree, let me know why. But anyways, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much. Be safe. Bye-bye.